My name is Lena. At 32, I own a successful art gallery in downtown Chicago. But 24 years ago, my family threw me away like garbage. My dad took my brother. My mom took my sister. And nobody took me. I was 8 years old when it happened. One minute we were a normal family in Oak Park. The next minute, Dad was stuffing Ethan's clothes into a duffel bag. Mom was buckling Claire into her car seat. "We'll come back for you," they both said. They lied. For nights, I waited alone in that house. 4 nights of stale Cheerios and blazing lights because the darkness felt too dangerous. 4 nights pressing my face against the window, watching for someone to remember I existed. Have you ever been completely invisible to your own family? On day 5, the neighbor called the police. Red and blue lights. Strangers with clipboards. And just like that, I vanished into the system while my parents started fresh somewhere else. That was 24 years ago. I survived. I built a life. I thought I'd moved on. Until last Tuesday, when my brother walked into my art gallery, rain dripping from his jacket, wearing the same guilty expression he had as a kid. "We need to talk," he said. What he told me in the next 5 minutes destroyed everything I thought I knew about that night. Because what my parents did wasn't just abandonment. It was so much worse than I ever imagined. Subscribe right now because by the end of the story, you'll understand why some betrayals can never be forgiven. And you'll see exactly what I did when I finally got my chance for revenge. Trust me, you won't see this coming. Before everything shattered, we were golden. Picture July 15th, 1991. Oak Park, Illinois, one of those tree-lined suburbs where kids still rode bikes without helmets and mothers hung laundry on actual clotheslines. The summer air smelled like fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from backyard grills. That's the day I took my first breath in Mercy Hospital, screaming my lungs out while Mom counted my tiny fingers and Dad paced the hallway, sawdust still caked under his fingernails from the construction site. We lived in a 2-story colonial on Maple Street. White picket fence. I'm not kidding. Dad built it himself, each slat perfectly aligned because that's how Mark Rodriguez did everything. Precise. Steady. Reliable. At least, that's what I believed. Our house had this wraparound porch where Mom would sit on Sunday mornings, coffee steaming in her favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw away. She'd watched Dad teach Ethan how to use a level, both of them crouched over some weekend project, their identical stubborn cowlicks catching the morning light. Inside, the walls were painted buttercup yellow. Mom's choice. She said yellow made everything feel like sunshine, even on the grayest Chicago days. Family photos lined the staircase. Ethan's gap-toothed school pictures, Claire's first steps, me blowing out birthday candles with frosting smeared across my cheeks. We looked happy. We looked whole. Sunday pancakes were sacred in our house. Not just any pancakes. Dad's secret recipe with a splash of vanilla and cinnamon that made the entire kitchen smell like heaven. He'd flip them high in the air, making Claire giggle and clap her pudgy hands. Ethan would try to catch them in his mouth. I'd sit cross-legged on the counter, sketching the chaos in my little notebook. "My artist," Mom would whisper, kissing the top of my head. Those sketches are long gone now, burned with everything else. Summer meant Lake Michigan. Every Saturday, Dad would load us into his rusty pickup truck, cooler packed with bologna sandwiches and warm Capri Sun. We'd claim our spot on Oak Street Beach, spreading out Mom's faded quilt that smelled like fabric softener and old sunscreen. Ethan was the daredevil, diving headfirst into waves that seemed enormous to my 8-year-old eyes. Claire built elaborate sandcastles that collapsed the moment the tide rolled in, then cried like the world was ending. Dad would scoop her up, spinning her until she forgot about the ruined towers. And Mom? She'd sit in her folding chair, hospital scrubs traded for a sundress, reading romance novels with shirtless men on the covers. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at the horizon with this dreamy expression, like she was imagining herself somewhere far away. Maybe she was already planning her escape. Have you ever noticed how perfect memories feel different when you know how the story ends? Friday nights were movie nights. Dad always picked action, Die Hard, Terminator, anything with explosions. Mom chose romantic comedies that made her cry happy tears. Ethan lobbied for anything with Jim Carrey. Claire was too little to care, usually asleep in Mom's lap by the opening credits. I never got to pick. I was always the tiebreaker, the swing vote, the one who went along with whatever everyone else wanted. Looking back, maybe that should have been a warning sign. Our living room felt enormous then, with its plaid couch that scratched my legs and the coffee table Dad built from reclaimed barnwood. We'd make a nest of blankets on the carpet, sharing a bowl of buttered popcorn while some Hollywood ending played out on our box television. During commercials, Dad would tell us stories about the houses he was building. Someday, he'd say, we'll have a place twice the size. Maybe on the lake, with a workshop bigger than this whole living room. Mom would smile and nod, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something I was too young to recognize as doubt. Christmas mornings were magic. Real magic, the kind that makes you believe in miracles and family and forever. Dad would be up at dawn, starting coffee and untangling lights while Christmas music played softly from the kitchen radio. Mom would emerge in her terry cloth robe, hair messy, looking more beautiful than any movie star. Ethan and I weren't allowed downstairs until Claire woke up. We'd wait at the top of the stairs, whispering and giggling, while our baby sister rubbed sleep from her eyes. Then we'd thunder down together, feet pounding on hardwood, hearts racing with anticipation. The tree always looked perfect. Dad hung every ornament with the same precision he brought to construction sites. Mom arranged the presents underneath, like she was staging a magazine photo. And for a few hours, opening gifts and eating Mom's famous cinnamon rolls, we felt invincible. We felt permanent. But here's what 8-year-old me didn't understand. Perfect can shatter in an instant. Those Sunday pancakes? The last batch Dad made, the batter was lumpy and he burned 3 in a row. His hands shook as he flipped them, and when Ethan complained about the bitter taste, Dad snapped and threw the spatula across the kitchen. That summer at the lake? Mom spent most of the time on her phone, pacing the shoreline while Dad drank beer after beer, his eyes getting glassy and mean. The movie nights? They became shouting matches over what to watch, with Claire crying and Ethan storming upstairs and me sitting frozen on that scratchy couch, wishing I could disappear into my sketchbook forever. The cracks were already showing. I just didn't know how to read them yet. What's the earliest sign you remember that your family was falling apart? Drop a comment. I want to hear your story too. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in October 1999. I remember because it was picture day at school and Mom had spent 20 minutes wrestling my hair into pigtails that wouldn't stay straight. She kept muttering under her breath about needing to look presentable for once, her hands shaking as she tried to tie the ribbons. That's when the phone rang. Dad's voice carried from the kitchen, sharp and panicked. What do you mean the check bounced? I deposited it yesterday. Mom's hands went still in my hair. The plastic brush clattered to the bathroom floor. Foreclosure. Dad's voice cracked on the word. How long do we have? Have you ever watched your parents' faces change when they think you're not looking? 1 second they're mom and dad, invincible and in control. The next second they're just scared people who have no idea what they're doing. That night, after Ethan finished his homework and Claire was tucked into her crib, I heard them fighting through the thin bedroom walls. The Henderson project fell through, Dad said, his voice thick with something I'd never heard before. Defeat. Materials cost more than they quoted. The clients threatening to sue. How much do we owe? Mom whispered. The silence stretched, so long I thought they'd stop talking. 43,000. Mom's sob echoed through the house like a gunshot. I pulled my pillow over my head, but their voices leaked through anyway. Mortgage payments. Credit cards. Ethan's school supplies. Claire's daycare. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter like accusations, each one another weight pressing down on our perfect yellow walls. The arguments started small. Dad leaving his muddy boots by the front door. Mom forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. Normal married couple stuff that suddenly felt volcanic. But then Dad started drinking. Not the casual weekend beer while grilling burgers. Real drinking. The kind where he'd stumble through the front door at dinner time, reeking of whiskey and failure, his eyes already somewhere else. Where were you? Mom would ask, Claire balanced on her hip, Ethan hiding behind the refrigerator. Working, Dad would slur. Always working. For this family. Everything I do is for this goddamn family. Mom's nursing shifts got longer. Double shifts. Sometimes triple. She'd leave before sunrise in her scrubs, hair pulled back so tight it made her eyes look hollow. She'd come home after midnight, microwaving leftover mac and cheese while we pretended to be asleep upstairs. The house started feeling bigger and emptier, like the walls were stretching away from each other. Ethan got angry first. 10-year-old rage that exploded without warning. He'd slam doors, kick furniture, scream at Claire for touching his things. One afternoon, I found him in the garage, taking Dad's hammer to an old birdhouse we'd built together the summer before. "I hate him," Ethan said, with splinters flying. "I hate this stupid house and this stupid family." I wanted to tell him to stop, but part of me understood the urge to break something beautiful just to watch it fall apart. Claire cried more. Endless, heart-wrenching sobs that nothing could fix. Not bottles, not toys, not Mom's exhausted lullabies at 2 a.m. She'd wail until her face turned red and her little fists shook, like she could sense the poison spreading through our perfect house. The yellow walls started looking different. Faded. Desperate. Like they were trying too hard to be cheerful. I found the bills one Thursday while looking for construction paper in Dad's desk. Envelopes marked final notice in angry red letters. Bank statements with negative numbers that made my stomach clench. A letter from something called Midwest Collections with words I didn't understand but knew were bad. Very bad. That's when I started disappearing into my drawings. Horses running through meadows. Princesses in castles with walls too high to climb. Families holding hands under sunshine that never stopped shining. Fantasy. Pure fantasy. The night everything exploded started like any other. Dad stumbled home from Murphy's Tavern with whiskey on his breath and defeat in his shoulders. Mom was folding laundry at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs from a 16-hour shift. "Dinner's in the fridge," she said without looking up. "Don't want dinner." "Then what do you want, Mark?" The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "I want my life back," he said finally. "I want to stop drowning. I want to stop failing every person in this house." Mom's hands went still on Claire's tiny pajamas. "We all want things," she whispered. That's when Dad saw the envelope on the counter. The one Mom had been hiding for 3 days. The one from the mortgage company with those terrible red letters. Final notice of foreclosure proceedings. The sound Dad made wasn't quite human. Part roar, part sob, all rage. The plate hit the wall first. Then the coffee mug with the chipped handle. Then Mom's favorite vase. The blue one from their honeymoon in Michigan. Glass everywhere. Shining fragments of our life scattered across the linoleum floor. "Mommy!" Claire screams from upstairs. "Stop it, Mark. You're scaring the kids." But Dad couldn't stop. 20 years of building things, creating homes for other families, and he couldn't even keep his own walls standing. When the screaming stopped and the glass settled, we weren't a family anymore. We were strangers living in the wreckage of someone else's dream. And I was about to learn that when everything falls apart, somebody always gets left behind. The morning of March 15th, 2000, started with pancakes. Not Dad's famous Sunday pancakes. These were frozen ones from the grocery store, heated in the toaster until they were cardboard crisp. Mom served them with syrup from a plastic bottle while Claire banged her sippy cup against her high chair. Nobody talked. We just chewed and pretended this was normal. Dad cleared his throat. "Kids, your mom and I need to tell you something." Ethan stopped mid-bite. I set down my fork. Even Claire went quiet, like she could sense the earthquake coming. "Sometimes," Mom said, her voice steady as surgical steel, "families need to reorganize. To get stronger." Have you ever heard adults use big words to hide terrible truths? "I'm taking a job in Wisconsin," Dad announced. "Construction's better there. More opportunities. And I'm going to stay with Aunt Patricia in Indiana for a while," Mom added. "Just until things settle down." The kitchen felt like it was shrinking around us. "What about us?" Ethan asked, his 10-year-old voice cracking. That's when they exchanged the look. The one that would haunt me for 24 years. Quick. Guilty. Desperate. "Ethan, you're coming with me," Dad said. "You're old enough to help with the business. Learn a trade." Mom reached for Claire's chubby hand. "And this little princess needs her mama." The silence stretched until it became suffocating. "What about Lena?" Ethan whispered. I held my breath. Waiting. Hoping. Praying to whatever God listened to 8-year-old girls whose worlds were crumbling. "Lena we'll figure it out," Dad mumbled into his coffee cup. Mom nodded quickly. Too quickly. It's just temporary, sweetheart. Just until we get back on our feet. But I saw the truth in their faces. In the way Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. In the way Mom's hands trembled as she wiped Claire's sticky fingers. They'd already decided. And I wasn't part of the plan. The next 2 hours passed like a fever dream. Dad stuffing Ethan's clothes into a duffel bag, while my brother protested and cried. Mom loading Claire's diaper bag with formula and toys, murmuring promises about a pretty room at Aunt Patricia's house. I sat on my bed, watching them divide our family like they were splitting up furniture. Where will I sleep? I asked when Dad passed my doorway.
He stopped, turned.
For just a second, I saw something crack behind his eyes. We'll call you tonight, he said. Figure out the details then. That was the last conversation I ever had with my father for 24 years. They left within minutes of each other. Dad and Ethan in the pickup truck, heading north toward Wisconsin. Mom and Claire in the rusty Chevy, driving south toward Indiana. Both promised they'd come back for me. Both lied. I stood in the living room window, pressing my palm against the cold glass, watching their taillights disappear into the gray March afternoon. The house felt enormous around me. Every sound echoed, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, my own breathing. That first night, I made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner. Ate them sitting on the kitchen floor because the table felt too big and empty. I called both phone numbers they'd left on the counter. Dad's went straight to voicemail. This is Mark. Leave a message. Mom's rang and rang and rang. Night 2, the power went out. I found flashlights in Dad's toolbox and built a fort out of couch cushions and blankets. Told myself this was an adventure. A camping trip indoors. But adventures don't last forever. And 8-year-old girls aren't supposed to live alone. By night 3, the Cheerios were running low. The milk had gone sour. I'd used the last of the peanut butter and couldn't reach the top shelves where Mom kept the real food. I tried calling again. Over and over. Sometimes Dad's phone was disconnected. Sometimes Mom's line was busy. Once, just once, someone picked up on her end. Hello. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Mommy, I whispered. The line went dead. That's when the real fear started. Not the kind from monster movies or thunderstorms. The kind that lives in your bones, whispering that maybe nobody's coming back. Maybe you're not worth coming back for. Night 4, I didn't sleep at all. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Every car passing outside might be them, finally remembering they'd left something behind.
Me.
I stayed curled in Mom and Dad's bed, surrounded by pillows that still smelled like her perfume and his aftershave, holding my breath every time headlights swept across the ceiling. But dawn came anyway, cold and gray and empty. That's when I heard the knocking. For one perfect second, my heart exploded with relief. They came back. They remembered. Lena? Honey, are you in there? Mrs. Harris from next door. Not Mom. Not Dad. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. She was standing on our porch in her bathrobe and slippers, holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. I brought you some cookies, sweetheart. Your parents asked me to check on you. Another lie. But this one felt different.
Kinda.
When I opened the door, Mrs. Harris took one look at me. Unwashed hair, same pajamas for 4 days, eyes red from crying, and her face went white. Oh, baby, she whispered. How long have you been alone? The truth tumbled out through sobs. 4 days. No food. No grown-ups. No phone calls returned. Mrs. Harris wrapped me in her soft arms that smelled like vanilla and fabric softener, and I felt safe for the first time in days. Until the police cars arrived. Red and blue lights flashing against our yellow walls. Officers with clipboards and serious faces asking questions I couldn't answer. Where are your parents? When are they coming back? Do you have other family? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. The social worker had kind eyes and a gentle voice. We're going to find you a nice place to stay, she said. Just temporarily. Until your mom and dad can take care of you again. But I already knew the truth. Even at 8 years old, temporarily was going to last forever. As they loaded my few belongings into the back of their car, I took one last look at our house. The home where I'd blown out birthday candles and built blanket forts and believed my family would last forever. The yellow walls looked gray now. Faded. like they'd already started forgetting we'd ever lived there. Subscribe because what happened next in the foster system will break your heart, and what I discovered about my family's lies will make your blood boil. 24 years later, I would learn this wasn't abandonment. It was something much worse. The first foster home smelled like cat litter and broken dreams. Mrs. Chun collected children like other people collect stamps, 23 of us crammed into a 3-bedroom house in Cicero. She got paid per head, so more kids meant more government checks. Quality control wasn't her priority. I lasted 6 weeks. My bed was a mattress on the floor in what used to be a dining room, shared with 3 other girls. Breakfast was generic cereal with powdered milk. Lunch was whatever the school provided. Dinner was usually beans and rice if there was dinner at all. But the hunger wasn't the worst part. The worst part was understanding that I'd become invisible. Not special. Not chosen. Just another mouth to feed in a system that treated children like inventory. "Don't get comfortable," whispered Aaliyah, the 12-year-old who'd been there longest. "Nobody stays forever. And nobody gets rescued." She was right about the first part, wrong about the second. Foster home number 2 belonged to the Daltons. Ray Dalton sold insurance and drove a pristine Buick that he washed every Saturday morning. His wife, Linda, taught Sunday school and made casseroles for church potlucks. From the outside, they looked perfect. Inside their split-level ranch house, I learned that some monsters wear crosses around their necks. "The rules are simple," Ray explained on my first day, his voice calm as pond water. "No talking back. No making messes. No being a burden." What he didn't mention, his definition of being a burden included things like using too much toilet paper, asking for seconds at dinner, crying when you missed your family. The basement became my second bedroom when I broke his rules. It happened 3 weeks in. Linda had made her famous tuna casserole, and I'd eaten my small portion without complaint. But growing kids get hungry, and I'd been hungry for months. "Can I have a little more?" I asked quietly. Ray's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The kitchen went dead silent. "What did you say?" I'm still hungry." His chair scraped against the linoleum as he stood. Greedy little girls need to learn gratitude. The basement was finished but cold. A fold-out cot. A single bare bulb.
No windows.
Ray locked the door from the outside. "You'll come up when you understand how lucky you are to be here," he said through the wood. I stayed down there for 2 days.
No meals.
Just a plastic cup of water Linda snuck down when Ray was at work. Have you ever been punished for having basic human needs? On the 3rd morning, Mrs. Rodriguez from Social Services made a surprise visit. Ray scrambled to explain my absence. Stomach flu, very contagious. Didn't want to spread it to their biological children. But Mrs. Rodriguez was smarter than Ray gave her credit for. She insisted on seeing me. And when she found me in that basement, hollow-eyed and shaking, her clipboard hit the floor with a bang that sounded like justice. I was gone within the hour. Foster homes 3 through 7 blurred together like a nightmare slideshow. The Williams family, who forgot to feed me for 3 days. The Kowalski house, where the teenage son thought 8-year-old girls made good practice targets for his anger. The apartment with Mrs. Patterson, who drank vodka from coffee mugs and cried about her dead husband while I made my own school lunches. Each placement started the same way. Social worker explaining that this family was excited to welcome you. New foster parents smiling and promising things would be different this time. And each one ended with the same phrase, "It's not working out." By foster home number 8, I'd stopped unpacking my garbage bag of belongings. What was the point? That's where I met Kevin. Kevin Martinez was 17, aging out of the system in 3 months. He'd been in care since he was 5, a veteran who'd survived things that would break most adults. He took one look at my dead-eyed stare and recognized a fellow survivor. First rule, he told me while we shared a pack of stolen cookies behind the garage. Don't trust anyone over 18. Second rule, don't trust anyone under 18 either. Kevin taught me how to hide food in my pillowcase, how to sleep light so I could wake up fast if someone came into my room uninvited, how to make myself small and forgettable when the foster parents got that look in their eyes. Most importantly, he taught me that survival was a skill you could learn. "You're not broken," he said the night before he aged out and disappeared into the world. "You're just bent. Bent things can still be useful." I never saw Kevin again, but his words kept me alive. Foster home number 9 belonged to Miss Harriet Washington, 73 years old, retired teacher. House that smelled like cornbread and lavender soap. She'd been taking in foster kids for 20 years, and somehow, miraculously, she still believed in their worth. Every child is God's gift, she told me on my first night, tucking a handmade quilt around my shoulders. Even the ones the world tries to throw away. For 8 months, I remembered what it felt like to be human. Miss Harriet made real breakfast, eggs and toast and orange juice in glasses, not plastic cups. She helped with homework at the kitchen table under warm, yellow light. She braided my hair and told me stories about her grandmother, who'd been born into slavery but died owning her own land. Terrible things happen to good people, she said one evening while we folded laundry together. But terrible things don't get to decide who you become. I started drawing again. Real pictures, not just the angry scribbles I'd been making. Miss Harriet pinned them to the refrigerator like they were masterpieces. But good things don't last in the foster system. Miss Harriet had a stroke on a Tuesday in November. I found her on the kitchen floor when I got home from school, her words slurred and her left side not working right. The ambulance took her away. Social services took me. It's temporary, Mrs. Rodriguez promised. Just until Miss Harriet recovers. But Miss Harriet never came home from a hospital. And I learned that even angels can't protect you from a system designed to chew up children and spit out broken adults. Foster homes 10, 11, and 12 were just warehouses. Places to sleep and eat until I turned 18 and became someone else's problem. By then, I'd mastered the art of emotional amputation. Cut off the parts that hurt. Bury the parts that hope. Survive with whatever's left. High school was my escape route. Not the social parts. I was too weird, too damaged, too obviously system. But the academic parts. Teachers who noticed when I turned in essays written on napkins because I didn't have real paper. Guidance counselors who saw potential in a girl everyone else had written off. Ms. Rivera at Lane Tech High School changed my trajectory with 5 words. Have you considered art school? I hadn't. Foster kids don't consider college. We consider survival. But MS. Rivera saw something in my sketches of broken windows and empty rooms. She helped me apply for community college, filled out financial aid forms, drove me to the campus for my interview. You have a gift, she said. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Subscribe now because what happened next proved that sometimes the family who abandons you isn't the one that destroys you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who teach you that trust is a luxury you can't afford. But here's what they didn't count on. Broken things can still cut back. And I was about to learn exactly how sharp I'd become. 7 years later, I thought I'd buried my family for good. At 25, I was finally building something that belonged to me. Community college had led to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. My paintings were getting noticed, dark, haunting pieces that galleries called emotionally provocative. I had my own studio apartment in Logan Square, a part-time job framing artwork, and friends who didn't know my story unless I chose to tell it. For the first time in my life, I felt invisible by choice, not by abandonment. That's when fate decided to remind me that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. It was a Thursday afternoon in October. I needed supplies for a commission piece, a series about childhood memories for a client who clearly hadn't lived through mine. Blick Art Materials on Michigan Avenue, the kind of place where art students and professionals mingled over tubes of cadmium red and arguments about brush quality. I was debating between 2 different canvas sizes when someone behind me gasped like they'd seen a resurrection. Lena? Oh my God. Lena Rodriguez? I turned and there she was. Aunt Carol. My mother's sister. The woman who was supposed to take Claire and Mom in during their temporary stay in Indiana 17 years ago. She looked older, obviously. Gray streaking through her brown hair, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when I was 8. But her voice was exactly the same, warm, slightly nasal, with that Indiana accent that flattened vowels like roadkill. My mouth went dry. Aunt Carol. I can't believe it's you. She stepped closer, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read.
Joy.
Confusion. Something that looked almost like guilt. You're so grown up. You look just like Elaine when she was your age. The mention of my mother's name hit like a physical blow, but I forced a smile. Yeah, people say that. What are you doing in Chicago? I thought. She stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale. You thought what? Carol's hands fluttered nervously around her purse strap. I mean, the last I heard, you were with your father. In Wisconsin. Doing well. The art supplies store suddenly felt too small. Too bright. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Wisconsin. I repeated slowly. Yes, Mark moved there with you kids after the divorce. That's what Elaine told us. You and Ethan were helping with his construction business, and Claire needed to be closer to family while your mom got back on her feet. Have you ever felt reality shift beneath your feet like an earthquake? Aunt Carol, I said carefully, I haven't seen my father since I was 8 years old. The color drained completely from her face. What? I've been in foster care since March of 2000. In Chicago. 12 different homes. The tube of paint she'd been holding clattered to the floor. That's impossible. Elaine calls me every few months with updates. She said you were doing great. Learning carpentry. Growing like a weed. My vision started tunneling. The art store, the other customers, everything except Carol's horrified face began to blur around the edges. She's been lying to you, I whispered. No, that can't be. She sends pictures sometimes. Of you and Ethan at job sites helping Mark with construction projects.
Pictures.
They've been sending fake pictures. Carol, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My parents left me alone in our house in Oak Park when I was 8 years old. Both of them.
Dad took Ethan.
Mom took Claire. Nobody took me. She started shaking her head, backing away like I was speaking in tongues. The police found me 4 days later. I've been in the system ever since. Foster homes. Group homes. Aging out at 18 with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a high school diploma. But the Christmas cards. She whispered. The birthday money I've been sending. What birthday money? Every year. $50 for your birthday. Sent to your dad's address in Wisconsin. They'd been intercepting money meant for me. For 17 years.
I felt something snap inside my chest.
Not break. I'd been broken so many times there wasn't much left to shatter. This was different. This was the sound of illusions being stripped away, leaving nothing but raw, terrible truth. How long? I asked. How long have they been telling you I was with Dad? Since the beginning. Since they got divorced. They never got divorced. Carol's face crumpled.
What?
My father abandoned me to go to Wisconsin. My mother abandoned me to go to Indiana. They never filed papers. Never made it legal. They just left. And then they spent 17 years lying to everyone who might come looking for me. The full scope of their betrayal hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just abandonment. This wasn't just two parents who couldn't handle their problems. This was premeditated. Calculated. They'd built an entire fictional narrative to cover up the fact that they'd thrown away their middle child like yesterday's newspaper. Every relative who might have wondered where I was. Every family friend who might have asked questions. Every teacher or neighbor or church member who might have reported them for neglect. They'd been told I was safe, thriving, growing up with my father, learning a trade, becoming the kind of success story that made everyone feel good about difficult family situations. Meanwhile, I'd been sleeping on mattresses on the floor, hiding food in pillowcases, learning that adults were just tall children with better lies. I have to call Elaine, Carol said, fumbling for her phone with shaking hands.
Right now.
There has to be an explanation. Don't. Something in my voice made her freeze. If you call her now, you'll warn her that I know. And I'm not ready for that conversation yet. Carol stared at me like I'd become someone she didn't recognize. Maybe I had. What are you going to do? I picked up the canvas I'd been planning to buy. Looked at it like it held answers to questions I was just learning to ask. I'm going to paint, I said finally. And then I'm going to decide if my family deserves to know I survived. What I painted next revealed a truth so dark, it changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the lies families tell to live with themselves. And when I finally decided to contact them, their reaction proved that some betrayals run deeper than abandonment. They run all the way to the bone. The painting I created after discovering my family's lies became the cornerstone of everything. I called it The Girl in the Window. Oil on canvas. 4 feet by 6 feet. A child's silhouette pressed against glass, waiting for headlights that would never come. Behind her, a house full of empty rooms. Ahead of her, nothing but darkness stretching to the horizon. It took me 3 months to finish. 3 months of working through rage and grief, and something deeper than both, a cold, crystalline fury that felt like power. My professor at the Art Institute, Marcus Chen, stopped dead when he saw it during critiques. "This isn't just art," he said quietly. "This is testimony." He was right. But I didn't know yet that testimony could become a weapon. The piece caught the attention of Elena Vasquez, owner of a small gallery in River North. She offered to include it in a group show called Fractured Childhoods, Artists Exploring Trauma Through Visual Narrative. I almost said no. Putting that painting in public felt like standing naked in Times Square. But something Carol had said kept echoing in my head. She sends pictures sometimes. My parents had been curating a false image of my life for 17 years. Maybe it was time to show the real one. The opening night was terrifying. 40 strangers wandering around white walls, sipping wine, and discussing brushstrokes, while my deepest wounds hung under gallery lighting. But something magical happened. People didn't just look at the girl in the window. They stopped. They stared. They whispered to each other with the kind of reverence usually reserved for cathedrals. And they bought it. $15,000. More money than I'd ever seen at once. "You have something special," Elena told me that night, her eyes bright with possibility. "Pain that pure, translated into images that powerful? That's not common." She commissioned a full series. 10 paintings. $25,000. Have you ever held a check that represented freedom? I quit my framing job the next morning. The series took 8 months to complete. I called it Abandoned Things. 10 paintings exploring what gets left behind when families fracture. Empty bedrooms with toys still scattered on the floor. Dinner tables set for 4 when only one person was coming home. Children's drawings taped to refrigerators and houses where no children lived anymore. Each piece sold before the exhibition even opened. By 27, I had my first solo show. Invisible Children featured 23 paintings, all exploring the foster care system through the eyes of someone who'd lived it. Kids sleeping on mattresses on the floor. Social workers with clipboards and tired eyes. Foster parents who collected children like welfare checks. The Chicago Tribune called it haunting and necessary. The Sun-Times said it was art that demands justice. More importantly, it sold out opening night. But success brought something I hadn't expected: recognition. My story started spreading through Chicago's art scene. The girl who'd been abandoned by her family and raised by the state. The artist who turned trauma into triumph. Interview requests. Gallery features. Collectors who wanted to own pieces of my pain. It should have felt validating. Instead, it felt dangerous. Because famous artists are easy to find. And families who'd spent 17 years hiding their crimes might not appreciate having their secrets hung on gallery walls. I moved to a better apartment in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that faced east, so I could paint in natural light. I furnished it carefully, every piece chosen for its permanence. Heavy furniture that couldn't disappear overnight. Art books that wouldn't fit in garbage bags. Plants that needed tending and time to grow. The opposite of foster care, in every possible way. I met Daniel Rivera at my 3rd solo exhibition. He was a social worker at the Children's Home and Aid Society, drawn to my work by its unflinching portrayal of systemic failure. We talked for 3 hours that first night, sitting on the gallery floor after everyone else had gone home. "I see kids like you every day," he said, studying a painting of a teenager aging out of care with nothing but a plastic bag of belongings. "But I never see what happens after. The ones who make it out." "Most don't make it out," I told him. "They make it through. There's a difference." Daniel understood the difference. He'd grown up in the system himself, placed at 12 when his mother's addiction finally outweighed her ability to keep him safe. But he'd been luckier. One placement, one family, parents who saw potential instead of problems. "You're building something beautiful from something terrible," he said. "That takes a special kind of strength." We dated for 2 years before I let him see me cry. Another year before I told him about the nightmares. But Daniel had patience the way some people have eye color, It was just part of who he was. My friend Zara came later. We met at a coffee shop in Wicker Park where she was sketching fashion designs and I was working on preliminary studies for a new series. She saw my drawings of broken dolls and abandoned playgrounds and introduced herself with the kind of directness that cuts through pretense. "Your work makes me uncomfortable," she said. I like that. Zara was everything I wasn't. Loud, fearless, unashamed of taking up space. She'd grown up in a big Puerto Rican family in Pilsen, surrounded by the kind of love that made my childhood look like solitary confinement. But she understood chosen family. Her biological relatives had rejected her when she came out at 16. She'd built her own tribe from artists and dreamers and misfits who knew that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. "Family is what you make it," she told me one night while we painted our nails black and complained about gallery politics. "Not what you're born into." By 30, I own my own gallery, Redemption Arts on North Wells Street, specializing in artists who'd survived trauma and transformed it into something beautiful. The opening exhibition featured my newest series, Letters Never Sent, paintings inspired by all the things I'd wanted to say to my parents, but never had the chance. The centerpiece was called The Girl Nobody Took. A self-portrait of 8-year-old me standing in our Oak Park living room, suitcases packed around my feet, while through the window you could see my family driving away in opposite directions. It sold for $50,000 to a collector who said it reminded her of Munch's The Scream, but with more hope. Hope. I liked that interpretation, because by then I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I had my own apartment, my own business, my own chosen family of people who'd proven their loyalty through actions, not biology. I thought I'd won. I thought my story was over. Because that's when the past came knocking on my door, literally. And I discovered that some battles aren't finished just because you stop fighting them. 24 years after my family threw me away, they decided they wanted me back. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Success, I learned, makes you easier to find. By 32, my gallery had been featured in Chicago Magazine twice. My art hung in collectors' homes from Lincoln Park to Lake Forest. I'd done interviews, gallery talks, even a small piece on WGN about artists who'd overcome adversity, their sanitized phrase for surviving hell. I should have realized that kind of visibility comes with risks. It was a Tuesday in March when my past finally caught up with me. Exactly 24 years and 2 weeks since the day they'd all driven away, leaving me behind like forgotten luggage. I was locking up the gallery after a late evening hanging new pieces for an upcoming exhibition. Chicago in March is unforgiving, wind that cuts through your coat and rain that feels personal. The kind of weather that makes you walk faster and keep your head down. That's why I almost didn't notice him at first. A figure standing under the street light across from my gallery. Still as a statue. Watching. Something about his posture made my skin crawl. Too familiar. Like muscle memory from a life I'd tried to forget. I fumbled with my keys, hands suddenly unsteady. When I looked up again, he was crossing the street, walking toward me with long, purposeful strides. The streetlight caught his face, and my world tilted sideways. Ethan? My brother had grown into a man I didn't recognize. Taller than Dad had ever been. Broader shoulders. Hands that looked like they knew hard work. But his eyes, those were exactly the same. Dark brown with flecks of gold. The eyes that had watched me from across our childhood dinner table. The eyes that had looked back at me from the rear window of Dad's pickup truck as they drove away. His voice was deeper now, roughened by years of smoking and shouting over construction noise. "You look good. Have you ever had a conversation with a ghost? What are you doing here?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. But 24 years of abandonment tends to make you suspicious of sudden appearances. Ethan shifted his weight, glancing around like he was checking for witnesses. "I found your gallery online. Saw your name in that magazine article. I've been keeping track. Keeping track. Like I was a stock portfolio instead of the sister he left behind. How long have you been watching me?" "Just tonight." I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you'd want to see me. The honest answer was no. I didn't want to see him. Didn't want to remember what it felt like to trust someone who'd proven that love was conditional. Temporary. Something that could be packed into a duffel bag and driven away. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And I'd spent 24 years wondering why. What do you want, Ethan? He looked down at his boots, steel-toed, covered in dried mud that reminded me so much of Dad it made my chest ache. It's about Dad. He's dying. 3 words that should have meant something. Should have triggered grief or anger, or at least surprise. Instead, I felt nothing. Just cold March wind cutting through my coat. Okay. Ethan's head snapped up. Okay, that's it. What did you expect? 24 years of silence, and now you want me to cry because a stranger I used to know is sick. He's not a stranger, Lena. He's our father. Our father. Like we still shared anything beyond DNA and bitter memories. Our father abandoned me when I was 8 years old, I said quietly.
He chose you.
He left me. Those are facts, Ethan, not opinions. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, another gesture inherited from Dad. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Then how is it supposed to happen? He thought Mom was taking you. She thought he was. By the time they realized the mistake, you were already in the system, and they didn't know how to fix it. A mistake. 24 years of foster homes and midnight terrors and learning to trust no one. All just a filing error in my family's bureaucracy of dysfunction. They could have called, I said. They could have come back. They could have tried. They were scared, ashamed, and then time just kept passing.
Time.
The universal excuse for cowardice. Why now? I asked. Why after all these years? Ethan's shoulders sagged like he was carrying invisible weight. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say he has maybe 2 months. 2 months to live. 24 years too late to matter. He wants to see you, Ethan continued. All of us together. One last time. At the lake house in Wisconsin. The lake house. The place they'd been living while I'd been surviving. Claire's driving up from Indiana next weekend. Mom's already there, helping take care of him. We could be a family again, Lena. Even just for a little while. A family. Like 24 years of abandonment could be erased with one deathbed reconciliation. I need to think about it, I said finally. Ethan nodded, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket pocket. My number. In case. In case you change your mind. He turned to walk away, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said without looking back. I'm sorry. I was just a kid, but I should have fought harder to bring you with us. What happened next shocked everyone, including me. I didn't go to the lake house. Instead, I chose neutral ground. And what my family revealed there proved that some apologies aren't worth accepting. I didn't go to the lake house. Instead, I chose Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse on Rush Street.
Public.
Neutral. Impossible to storm out of without making a scene. The kind of place where people keep their voices down and their emotions in check. If my family wanted a reunion, it would be on my terms. I spent 3 days preparing. Not picking out clothes or rehearsing speeches. Preparing emotionally. Building walls. Reminding myself that these people had forfeited their right to hurt me 24 years ago. Daniel offered to come with me. So did Zara. My chosen family, ready to stand guard while I faced my biological one. I need to do this alone, I told them. But stay close. In case I need extraction. They were waiting for me when I arrived at 7 sharp. A table for 5 in the back corner, away from the main dining room. I spotted them before the hostess could guide me over, a nervous-looking family reunion playing out in real time. There was Dad first. Mark Rodriguez, 67 years old, confined to a wheelchair that looked too big for his shrunken frame. Cancer had hollowed him out, carved away everything except the essential architecture of who he used to be. But his eyes were still sharp, still familiar. Mom sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder like she was keeping him tethered to earth. Elaine looked older than her 64 years, gray hair pulled back in a style that was practical rather than flattering. She wore a navy dress that probably came from Kohl's, and the kind of sensible shoes that suggested long hours on her feet. Claire had grown into a suburban dream. 30 years old, blonde highlights professionally maintained, wearing what looked like a designer blouse that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in a month. She sat straight-backed and perfect, the kind of woman who organized charity fundraisers and drove a white SUV with stick-figure families on the rear window. And Ethan, looking uncomfortable in a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit his construction worker's frame, kept checking his phone like he was hoping for an emergency that would let him escape. They all looked up when I approached the table. 4 faces, wearing identical expressions of guilty hope. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like the prosecution entering a courtroom full of defendants? Lena. Mom's voice cracked on my name like she'd been practicing how to say it. You came. I sat down in the empty chair, the one facing them all. Symbolic positioning. Me against them. I'm here, I said. Not I came. Present tense. Temporary. The silence stretched until our server appeared, asking about drinks with the kind of cheerful professionalism that cuts through family tension like a knife.
Water, I said.
Just water. They ordered wine. Liquid courage for the conversation none of them wanted to have. Dad cleared his throat, a sound like gravel shifting.
You look good, Mija.
Successful. Mija. Little daughter. A pet name from a lifetime ago, wielded now like a peace offering. Don't, I said quietly. Don't use words you lost the right to say. His face crumpled slightly, but he nodded. You're right. I wanted you to know I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You don't know what I've accomplished. You know what Google tells you. We've been following your career, Mom interjected, her voice taking on that nurse-like tone I remembered, calm, soothing, meant to de-escalate. Your art is beautiful, honey. Powerful. My art is about surviving the family that abandoned me. Are you proud of inspiring that?
The wine arrived.
They all reached for their glasses. We need to explain, Claire said suddenly. Her voice was softer than I'd expected, tinged with what might have been genuine regret. About what happened. Why it happened. I'm listening. Dad leaned forward in his wheelchair, each word clearly costing him effort. It was chaos, Lena. The business was failing. The house was in foreclosure. Your mom and I, we weren't thinking straight. We were barely thinking at all, Mom added. We were just trying to survive. To get the kids somewhere safe while we figured out how to fix everything.
Kids.
Plural. But somehow their definition of kids hadn't included me. I thought your father was taking you, Mom continued. He thought I was. By the time we realized. How long? I asked.
What?
How long before you realized nobody had taken me? The silence stretched like a held breath. 2 weeks, Ethan said finally. Dad called Mom to check on you, and she said you were with him. He said you were with her. And then, panic, Dad whispered. We called the house. No answer. We called the neighbors. They said social services had taken you into care. So, you came back for me. Another silence. Longer this time. We tried, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. We called a caseworker. But they said you were settled. In a good home. That disrupting the placement might be traumatic.
Lies.
All lies. And they knew I knew it. Which caseworker? I asked. It was so long ago. What was her name? What agency? What was the address of this good home I was supposedly settled in? Nothing. Because there were no phone calls.
No caseworker conversations.
No attempts at retrieval. The truth, I said, my voice cutting through their fabrications like a scalpel. 24 years later, I deserve the truth. Dad's shoulders shook, and for a moment I thought he was crying. Then I realized he was laughing. A bitter, broken sound. You want the truth? He said. The truth is we were cowards. Selfish, broken cowards who told ourselves that someone else would fix what we destroyed. Mom reached for his hand. Mark.
No, Elaine.
She's right. We invented stories to make ourselves feel better. Told everyone you were safe because we couldn't face admitting we'd lost you. Lost me? I repeated. I wasn't car keys, Dad. I was your daughter. You were, he whispered. You were our daughter, and we failed you so completely that we spent 24 years lying about it. To everyone. Including ourselves. Claire spoke up, her perfect suburban composure finally cracking. Aunt Carol called Mom last week. Said she'd seen you. Said you told her about foster care. About what really happened. So that's what had triggered this reunion. Not dying father's regret. Fear that their carefully constructed lies were unraveling. 12 homes, I said conversationally, like I was discussing the weather. Some good. Some bad. Some that taught me that adults are just children with better excuses. Lena. Mom's voice broke completely. I was locked in a basement for asking for seconds at dinner. Did you know that? For being hungry.
Tears now.
From all of them. I aged out at 18 with a garbage bag of clothes and no family to call when the world got scary. But you probably don't know about that either. You were too busy sending fake Christmas cards. We wanted to find you, Ethan said desperately. But we didn't know how. And then years passed, and it felt too late. It was too late, I agreed. It was too late the moment you drove away. The restaurant continued its elegant dinner service around us. Other families laughing over expensive steaks. Other conversations that didn't require 24 years of repair work. What do you want from us? Dad asked finally. What would make this right? I looked at each of them. These strangers wearing familiar faces. These people who'd shared my DNA, but never my struggles. Nothing, I said simply. There's nothing you can give me that I haven't already built for myself. But that wasn't entirely true. What I said next changed everything, and proved that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to grant forgiveness. What happened after I walked out of that restaurant? That's when things got really interesting. I didn't walk out immediately. That would have been too easy. Too clean. And nothing about this family had ever been clean. Instead, I sat back in my chair and really looked at them. These 4 people who'd shaped my entire life by choosing to remove themselves from it. You know what's funny? I said, my voice steady as surgical steel. For 24 years, I wondered what I'd done wrong. What made me so easy to leave behind. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom whispered. I know that now. But 8-year-old me didn't. 8-year-old me thought maybe if I'd been prettier, or smarter, or quieter, or louder, maybe then someone would have wanted to keep me. Claire's mascara had started running. Perfect suburban princess, crying over appetizers she wasn't touching. I spent years in therapy. I continued. Thousands of dollars working through abandonment issues, trust issues, the inability to believe that people who say they love you won't disappear without warning. We're sorry, Dad said, each word clearly exhausting him. We're so damn sorry, Mija, Lena. We're sorry. Are you sorry for abandoning me? Or are you sorry you got caught lying about it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Both, he admitted finally. Both. At least he was honest now. Dying had apparently burned away his capacity for pretty lies. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out my phone and placing it on the table between us. I'm going to record the rest of this conversation. And you're going to tell me the complete truth. No more stories about caseworkers who don't exist or phone calls that never happened. Lena, please, Mom started. The truth. Or I leave right now, and you never see me again. They exchanged glances, the same kind of wordless communication I remembered from childhood, deciding whether they could trust each other, whether they could trust me. Start recording, Ethan said quietly. I hit record. My name is Lena Rodriguez, I said clearly. It's March 22nd, 2024. I'm sitting in a restaurant with the family who abandoned me 24 years ago, and I'm asking them to tell the truth about what they did. Dad leaned forward in his wheelchair. We left you alone in the house in Oak Park on March 15th, 2000. We told ourselves it was temporary, that one of us would come back for you once we got settled. But you didn't.
No.
We didn't. Because. He stopped, struggling with words that had been locked away for decades. Because it was easier to pretend someone else had you than to admit we'd failed so completely as parents. Who suggested the lie? I asked. Another silence. I did, Mom said finally. When Carol called asking about you, I panicked. Said you were with Mark. Then when Mark's mother called, I told him to say you were with me. And then it just snowballed. For 24 years. For 24 years, she confirmed. Did you ever try to find me? Really try. The hesitation told me everything I needed to know. We told ourselves you were better off without us, Claire said, her voice barely audible. That the system would give you stability we couldn't provide. Have you ever heard someone rationalize evil with good intentions? Did any of you ever wonder if I was okay? If I was safe? If I was alive? Every day, Dad whispered. Not enough to do anything about it.
No.
Not enough. I stopped the recording. 24 years of questions finally had answers. They were exactly as ugly as I'd expected. What happens now? Ethan asked. Now you get to live with the truth you've been running from. And I get to decide whether any of you deserve a place in the life I built without you. Do we? Claire asked. Deserve a place? I looked at her. This sister I barely knew, who'd grown up with bedtime stories and birthday parties while I'd learned to hide food in my pillowcase and sleep with one ear open. You'll have to earn it, I said finally. All of you.
How?
Start with honesty. Real honesty. Not deathbed confessions motivated by guilt. If you want any kind of relationship with me, it starts with acknowledging what you did.
To me.
To our extended family. To everyone you lied to. You mean tell people the truth? Mom asked, looking terrified. I mean stop living a lie. Carol deserves to know where her birthday money really went. Your friends deserve to know why I wasn't at family gatherings for 24 years. And you deserve to carry the weight of your choices. Dad nodded slowly. What else? Therapy. All of you. Because whatever broke in you that made abandoning a child seem reasonable, that needs to be fixed before you can be trusted with anyone's heart again. And if we do those things, Ethan asked, then maybe we can build something new. Not the family we used to be, because that family was built on dysfunction and denial. Something honest. Something real. What about forgiveness? Claire whispered. The question I'd been dreading. The one they all wanted answered. Forgiveness isn't something you get to demand, I said. It's something I might choose to give.
Someday.
If you prove you've actually changed. If you prove you understand what you destroyed. How long will that take? Mom asked. However long it takes.
Years, maybe.
Or never. That's the consequence of abandoning someone. You don't get to control the timeline of their healing. I stood up, reaching for my coat. Where are you going? Dad asked, panic creeping into his voice. Home.
To my real family.
The people who chose me and stayed. Will we see you again? I paused, looking down at these 4 broken people who'd spent 24 years avoiding the truth about themselves. That depends on whether you do the work. Real work. Not just words designed to make yourselves feel better. How will we know if we're doing it right? You'll know you're doing it right when you stop asking me to tell you. When you start doing it because it's right, not because you want something from me. I walked toward the exit, then turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I said, I hope you succeed. Not for my sake. I'm fine without you. But for yours. Because living with the weight of what you did to a child, that's a hell I wouldn't wish on anyone. Outside, the March air felt clean and sharp. Daniel was waiting in his car across the street, just like he'd promised. Zara was in the passenger seat, both of them ready to catch me if I fell. But I wasn't falling. I was walking.
Strong. Steady.
Toward the family I'd chosen. Away from the family that had chosen everyone but me. 3 months later, I opened my most successful exhibition ever. The Girl Nobody Took featured 37 paintings exploring abandonment, survival, and the radical act of choosing yourself when no one else will. It sold out opening night. Carol came to the opening. She'd finally heard the truth from Mom, and she cried when she saw the painting of the birthday money, envelopes addressed to a child who never received them, stacked like broken promises on a kitchen counter. My biological family didn't come to the opening. But Daniel was there. Zara was there. Marcus, my old professor. Elena from the gallery. Kevin Martinez, who'd found me through a newspaper article and wanted to see what the scared foster kid had become. My real family. The one I'd built from scratch. The one that understood that love is a choice you make every day, not a biological accident. 6 months later, Ethan called to tell me Dad had died. I felt sad, but not devastated. You can't lose something you never really had. I didn't go to the funeral. Instead, I painted. Because that's what survivors do. We create beauty from ashes. We build hope from heartbreak. And we remember that sometimes being nobody's choice is the beginning of learning to choose yourself. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? What would you have done in my shoes? Subscribe for more stories about survival, betrayal, and the families we choose when the ones we're born in to choose everyone but us. Your story matters too. And you're stronger than you know. 6 months after that restaurant confrontation, Dad called me. His voice was different. Weaker from the cancer, but also cleaner somehow. Less defensive. More honest. "I failed you," he said simply. "Not just when you were 8, but every single day after that when I could have tried to find you and chose not to. I can't change what I did, but I need you to know that I see it now. I understand what we destroyed." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a pretty bow. But it was acknowledgement. And after 24 years of silence, truth meant something. Here's what I've learned about forgiveness. It's not about excusing what happened or pretending it didn't shatter you into pieces. It's about releasing yourself from the prison of rage, not for their benefit, but for your own freedom. I forgave my parents. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to stop carrying their poison in my bloodstream. Family isn't just DNA. It's every mentor, friend, and supporter who showed up when my biological family disappeared. Family is who loves you consistently, not who shares your chromosomes. That abandoned 8-year-old girl still lives inside me. I honor her courage, her refusal to give up, her determination to survive when the entire world seemed to turn its back on her. But she doesn't control my story anymore. She's a chapter, not the whole book. In my gallery office, I keep 2 photos side by side. One shows a gap-toothed little girl with hopeful eyes, taken before everything fell apart. The other is recent, a woman with strength in her gaze and scars she's transformed into art. Both are me. Both are true. Both deserve to be seen. Subscribe, because your story matters too. Whether you've rebuilt your definition of family, survived abandonment, or learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, you're not alone. Drop a comment. Have you ever had to choose forgiveness without forgetting? What does family mean to you? Remember, your past shapes you, but it doesn't have to define you. You get to write the ending. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to let their choices destroy your capacity for joy. Thank you for listening to my story.